Hey, I'm the daughter my parents branded as trash, all because I fell in love with a black man they dismissed as a nobody. They showered my sister with praise for marrying into wealth. But me? They called me a disgrace. What they didn't know was who he truly was. And when they finally found out, it was far too late to undo the damage they'd done. So, before we dive in, let me ask, what time is it where you are? And have you ever been judged for who you chose to love? Drop a comment below. I'm all ears. I stood there clutching a delicate silk scarf between my fingers, its delicate stitching starting to unravel at the edges. L and J forever. Someone had dropped it carelessly, maybe me, maybe someone else slipping in a subtle jab. But finding it next to the trash can outside the country club felt intentional, like a silent scream at the end of an unspoken verdict. The air was heavy, humid, clinging to my skin like a secret I couldn't shake. James had already walked ahead to the car, hands shoved in his pockets, shoulders stiff but tired. I followed, my heels tapping sharply against the cobblestone path. We didn't speak until we reached the car. He opened the passenger door for me, as he always did, a quiet act of grace even after what had just gone down. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low, careful. "I don't even know what that means anymore," I replied, smoothing the scarf in my lap as if it could hold on to something sacred. The drive home was silent, not strained, just empty, like something vital had been carved out of us and left behind on that brunch table, surrounded by silver trays and clinking champagne flutes. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. Instead, I counted the slights I'd endured over the years. The times I was relegated to the kids' table at family gatherings, even in my 30s. The birthdays they forgot. The career milestones they never bothered to ask about. The way my mother's eyes had raked over James like he'd tracked mud across her pristine world. I tallied how often I'd let it go, whispering to myself, "They'll come around." But the truth was, they understood perfectly. They just didn't care. By the time we pulled into the driveway of our cozy craftsman home on the quiet edge of Charlotte, James was already tugging at his tie. We'd bought this place together 6 years ago. No trust funds, no handouts, just our hard-earned savings, and a mortgage we'd paid off ahead of schedule. I unlocked the front door, and the faint scent of eucalyptus from the diffuser greeted me. Funny how our home ran smoother than any family event I'd ever attended. James headed to the kitchen. "I'll make tea," he said, his go-to when words couldn't mend the hurt. I nodded and drifted to the living room, still holding the scarf. I set it on the coffee table beside a coaster etched with "Love blooms in small spaces." For a split second, I almost laughed, but it was sharp, bitter. I sank onto the couch and opened my laptop. I hadn't planned to do this now, not like this. But something inside me had shifted, cracked wide open. Maybe it was the way my mother had sneered, "You married down, Laura." As if love was a currency to be traded. As if James, who'd held me through failed pitches and late-night panic attacks, was worth less than the polished veneer of my sister's fiancé, Ethan. What they didn't know was that James wasn't a groundskeeper, as they'd assumed. That was just the story we'd let them believe. He owned a landscaping company with contracts across 3 states, 70 employees, and a stake in a real estate firm that had just sealed a $15 million deal. We never corrected them because I wanted to know if they'd ever love me for me. Not for what I could reflect back to their egos. Today's brunch had answered that question with brutal clarity. I clicked open a folder labeled Greenwood Ventures. I'd helped build that from the ground up. James had insisted I be co-owner of every asset. We'd created a quiet empire while they sipped mimosas and mocked my poor choices. James didn't need their validation, but I'd still yearned for their acceptance, or at least a nod that I existed. A soft clink snapped me back. James set a steaming mug beside me and perched on the armrest. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying a thread of pain he tried to bury. I shook my head. "You have nothing to apologize for." He looked at me, searching. "Then why do I feel like I'm the reason they keep hurting you?" I leaned into him, my head against his chest. "Because you're the mirror. You show them who they are." He wrapped an arm around me, his hand tracing slow circles on my shoulder. I thought about that scarf, how even something woven with care could be discarded when it didn't suit someone's story. But not mine. Not anymore. The scarf stayed in my lap the whole drive home, like a question I couldn't answer. The city. Blurred past. Corner stores we'd memorized. Crosswalks where we'd bickered over shortcuts. The flower shop where James had bought me tulips after our second miscarriage. Back home, the familiar click of the front door grounded me. James loosened his collar and asked if I wanted grilled chicken or pasta. "Whatever's easiest," I said, though neither of us had an appetite. He cooked anyway, steady and deliberate, as if a hot skillet and fresh herbs could salvage the dignity we'd left behind. I slipped into the bedroom and closed the door, softly. The room was dim, lit only by a single lamp's warm glow. Our wedding photo hung on the wall, just us outside a Raleigh courthouse, me in a cream sundress, James in a simple suit, no family, just a breeze lifting my hair and his hands, steadying me. I stared at it, my reflection faint in the glass. They said I'd married beneath me, but they never asked why I chose him. Not once did they wonder what he was like when I was crumbling under work stress, or how he'd read me poetry after my grant applications were rejected. Instead, I got, "Samantha's fiancé just got her a lake house. Are you two still in that starter home?" And of course, "You can't polish a groundskeeper into a gentleman." The thing is, James wasn't a groundskeeper. They'd pinned that label on him after seeing him at a charity event, coordinating his crew. They never noticed he was the one giving orders, that the site manager reported to him. I let them believe it, maybe to test who they were without their masks. I sat on the bed, my mind drifting to high school. The auditorium was packed when I won the North Carolina Young Innovator Award for my water filtration prototype. The crowd cheered, but when I looked for my parents, they were fussing over Samantha, who'd just been named homecoming queen. "She's the star," my father said at dinner. "Not everyone's cut out for lab coats." That spring, Samantha brought home a boy from a banking dynasty. They welcomed him like a prince. When I wanted to go to prom with Malik, my coding partner, a shy, brilliant black kid, my mother sighed, "You're not equipped for that kind of drama, sweetie." I didn't go. They never said the word, but it hung in the air. It wasn't just race. It was status, image, their altar of appearances. I was the sacrifice they offered without hesitation. The clatter of dishes drifted from the kitchen, mingling with the scent of garlic and thyme. I stood, opened my laptop on the dresser, and found a draft blog post I'd written months ago, never shared. Married to a mogul, treated like a mistake. It detailed James's holdings, the firm he'd built from nothing, the year he took a sabbatical to work alongside his crews because he believed in leading by example. I'd written it hoping I'd one day be brave enough to show the world who we were. But that wasn't the goal anymore. I didn't need their applause or their headlines. I just wanted to stop asking if they'd love me if they knew the truth. Today, I had my answer. I scrolled to the bottom, hovered over publish, then clicked save draft. Not yet. James's voice came from the hall, warm and steady. Dinner's ready. I closed the laptop, touched the edge of our wedding photo, and whispered, "They'll never see it, but I do." I stepped into the kitchen where a warm plate, a familiar chair, and the man who'd never needed a title to be my equal waited. I didn't need revenge. I just needed proof they'd never valued me, only what I could do for them. And sure enough, it arrived 3 days later, slipped into our mailbox like a hollow gesture from people who'd never apologized. A thick ivory envelope heavy with pretense sat in the mailbox. My name, Laura, was embossed in silver. No mention of James, no and guest. The address was printed, impersonal. I stood on the porch, sunlight grazing my fingertips as I traced the envelope's edge. Maybe this was it, a step toward reconciliation. Inside was a glossy card, pearl background, gold foil, a photo of Samantha in a sleek gown beside a man who looked like he'd rehearsed his smirk. Celebrate the union of Samantha Pierce and Nathan Caldwell, a rising star in fintech. No note, no call, no hope you can make it. I stood in the foyer, card in hand, torn between laughing and screaming. Instead, I set it on the hall table and made coffee. That night, my phone rang at 8:15. My mother. I let it go to voicemail, but she called again. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Laura?" she said, her voice dripping with the performative charm she used at charity. "Luncheons. You got the invitation, I trust?" "I did." "Oh, darling, it's going to be exquisite. Nathan just closed a deal with a crypto startup. 9 figures, can you imagine? Our Samantha's chosen so well." I bit my lip, silent. She plowed. On. "It's at the Willow Grove estate. Full catering, string quartet, and the guest list. Senators, VCs, even that lifestyle blogger from Channel 9. No pause, no, how are you? No mention of James. I cleared my throat. Am I supposed to be there? A brief hesitation. Well, it's a selective event, you know, but we'd love your support in other ways. Samantha wants it to be refined. I don't recall hanging up, but the silence afterward was thick. James looked up from the couch where he was sorting mail, his brow raised. I shook my head. Just static, I said. 2 days later, my phone pinged. A text from Samantha. Hey, Mom says a 1.2K sculpture from that art place you like would be great. Can you ship it to the venue? No greeting, no please. I read it 3 times. The audacity stinging more than the assumption I was just their errand girl. Last year, she'd forgotten my birthday. I'd still sent her a custom bracelet and a note I'd agonized over for an hour, hoping I'd be more than a footnote in their story. I stepped onto the porch, the city lights flickering below like a promise that never delivered. I thought, of every time I'd bailed them out, covering my grandfather's hospital bills, paying for my mother's new deck after a storm, wiring Samantha money for her car repair. But their love was a ledger, balanced by status, diminished by James's skin, his job, our life. I opened my phone's notes app and typed, "No gift. They showed you their truth. Show them yours." I saved it, locked the screen. James joined. Me outside, setting a mug of peppermint tea by my elbow. He didn't ask. I looked at him. They kind of invited me, and they want something. He smiled, soft. Of course they do. I didn't reply to the text, but I started planning. I didn't send the sculpture. I sent something they never saw coming. It began with a single call, made Monday morning after I'd loaded the dishwasher and James had left for his morning run. I stood barefoot on the hardwood, staring out at the Charlotte skyline through a veil of mist, phone pressed to my ear. "Ms. Hargrove," I said, voice even. "Laura, what a treat," she replied, her warmth genuine. She was a retired curator who'd mentored me early in my career. "I was just thinking about the grant for the Torres duo. Their urban garden project is thriving. That's why I'm calling," I said, pouring coffee. "I want to fund it fully. No need for the committee vote. Transfer the amount we discussed." A pause, the rustle of papers. "That's generous. They'll be overjoyed." I set the mug down. "Also, pull the Ellison Gallery's sponsorship from the Pierce Caldwell engagement event." Silence. "Laura, that's this weekend. They've already—" "I know, but we've always said the gallery stands for authenticity, not posturing. You once told me you admired James's integrity." A quiet moment, then a slow exhale. "You're right. I'll make the call this afternoon." I hung up, set the phone down, and breathed. By Thursday, the ripples were waves. I didn't have to dig deep to see the fallout. The event's PR team was scrambling. Samantha's engagement party had lost its flagship art sponsor, and with it, the bespoke exhibit meant to make the night iconic, as one blog put it. They'd swapped in generic prints from a chain store. A post online read, "From chic to cheap, Caldwell engagement flops without its centerpiece." I wasn't mentioned, but I knew. That evening, as I sorted laundry, my phone buzzed. A text. From a journalist friend. "You're doing?" I sent a single emoji. A zipped lip smile. I didn't owe anyone a story. Friday arrived. I hadn't planned to watch the live stream, but curiosity won. As I chopped vegetables for stew, James propped his tablet on the counter and pulled up the feed. The scene was predictable. White linens, overdressed guests, stifling southern heat. But the stage looked bare, the walls empty, no art to elevate. The affair. Nathan's aunt was caught on a hot mic muttering, "This is tacky." Samantha smiled, but her eyes were glassy. I switched off the tablet. That night at 9:30, my phone rang. My mother. I almost ignored it, but I answered. "Laura," she snapped, no preamble. "What did you do?" I sat on the couch, crossing my legs. "Good evening to you too." "Don't play games. You pulled the gallery, your influence. Whatever it was. You humiliated us. You ruined Samantha's moment." I held the phone away, then brought it back. "I didn't ruin anything. I just opted out. Isn't that what you wanted?" "You're petty, jealous." I almost laughed. "Jealous of what? A show built on shallow optics?" Her words cut, but I kept my voice steady. "You wanted distance, Mom. I'm giving it to you. Silence. Then a click. I didn't call back. Later, as the city quieted and cicadas hummed outside, I stood on the porch, a shawl around my shoulders. James joined me, fresh from a shower, and stood close. I held a small cedar box, a gift I'd once planned. To give them, a hand-carved pendant I'd designed with a local jeweler, 2 doves for unity, for family. I never sent it. I wouldn't. James didn't ask about the box. He just pulled me into his warmth, and we stood under the soft night sky. Some truths don't need words. 3 days later, the engagement buzz faded from social media. The family group chat went silent, but I wasn't done. It was raining that morning, a gentle patter against the windows, the kind that hushes the world. I stayed in bed, not because I was tired, but because I wasn't ready to move. James left a mug of coffee on the nightstand, still hot, and kissed my forehead before slipping out. I lay there staring at the ceiling as gray light crept in. Our wedding photo sat on the dresser, us in a park holding hands, laughing like nothing could touch us. No family, no fanfare, just us. I'd thought time would soften them. It hasn't, I whispered. It had only sharpened their edges. I reached for my phone, not sure why. Maybe to check the news. Maybe to scroll through old photos to remind myself I was still here. Instead, I found a voice memo in the family chat, sent by mistake, labeled Dad's Update. I tapped it. Static, then my father's voice. She married beneath her. What can you do? She's always been a letdown. A dry chuckle, cruel. Samantha's voice chimed in. At least I chose right. I didn't drag us down. Then nothing. I sat up, my hands shaking, not from shock but from the cold precision of it. They didn't think I'd hear. That was the knife. I nearly deleted it, my finger grazing the trash icon, but I stopped. I forwarded it to my email, adding a note. Play this if you ever think they'll change. I set the phone down and stared into the quiet. Their voices lingered, smug, certain I'd never be enough, not because of what I did, but because of who I was. I got up, pulled on James's old hoodie, and padded to the living room. The coffee was cold. I didn't bother reheating it. That afternoon, I cleaned the attic, not because it was messy, but because I needed to move, to discard. Behind a stack of boxes, I found an old trunk, childhood keepsakes, faded postcards, a ribbon from a science fair no one attended. I tossed most of it. That evening, as rain tapped the roof and the fireplace glowed, I sat on the floor with the last item, Samantha's wedding invitation. The edges were singed from a moment months ago when I'd held it to a candle, too raw to let it burn. Now I studied the charred corner and the elegant script. Together with their families. I exhaled, calm. As the last light faded, I fed the invitation to the fire and watched it curl into ash. No alarms sounded. The next morning, the ashes remained, gray and brittle. I left them there, slipped into James's flannel, and opened my laptop in the study. The inbox was full, bills, a pitch, then a subject line that stopped me. Bridal collection launch preview. It was from a PR firm tied to Samantha's lifestyle brand. I almost deleted it, but clicked instead. The email was bright, bubbly, littered with emojis. A slideshow loaded and the third image hit like a punch. A sleek garden tool, a modular planter with a biodegradable frame. The caption read, "Crafted by Pierce Designs, patent pending." But I knew it. I walked to the garage, pulled a box from a shelf, and unwrapped a prototype James had built 4 years ago in our old apartment. I remembered him tinkering late at night, laughing. It's practical, not pretty. We'd eaten ramen that week because he'd spent our budget on materials. I returned to the laptop, opened a private cloud folder I'd kept without James knowing, and found every sketch, every blueprint he'd dismissed as not ready. I'd filed them under an LLC I'd set up for side projects, dormant but mine. "You protect who you love," I murmured, even from their own modesty. Now Samantha was selling his work as her own, no credit, no shame. I didn't yell or call James. I opened a legal template, updated the date, swapped the product code, and addressed it to Pierce Designs. Subject: Cease and desist. Intellectual property theft. I signed it, Elise K. Ward, Counsel, Stonefield LLC. On a blue sticky note, I wrote, "You loved the design. You just didn't know it was ours." I sealed it in an envelope, dropped it in the courier bin for Samantha's firm, and stood by the window watching clouds drift. No fanfare, no drama, just a quiet reckoning. My phone buzzed. An email from my mother, forwarded by mistake. Thrilled for Samantha's bridal tea this Sunday. Family only. Pure elegance. I wasn't included. I let the screen dim, grabbed my coat, and buttoned it with steady hands. They hadn't invited me, but I wasn't staying home. The morning was crisp, the air sharp with truth. I drove to the vineyard where the bridal tea was unfolding, the hills glowing under a golden sun. The venue was a sprawl of ivy-covered arches and linen-draped tables, soft piano notes weaving through the chatter. I hadn't been invited, but I walked in, my steps measured. Samantha was mid-speech, a flute of sparkling cider in hand, her dress a vision of tailored perfection. She faltered when she saw me at the edge of the crowd. My mother, seated with a cluster of socialites, froze, her smile curdling. "This isn't your place, Laura," she said, loud enough for heads to turn. My father, nursing a mimosa, muttered, "We made it clear this is Samantha's day." Guests shifted, some staring, others looking away. A woman in a wide-brimmed hat gripped her necklace, as if I'd stormed in with a megaphone. I didn't respond. I took a spot near the back, hands clasped, and listened. Samantha rallied, lifting her glass. As I was saying, family is who builds you up, who mirrors your best self. Sometimes you have to let go to protect that. Polite laughs, veiled barbs dressed in silk. When servers circled with drinks, they bypassed me. I reached for a glass on a tray, but a young waiter blocked me, nervous. "Sorry, ma'am, you're not on the list." I gave a small smile. "No worries, I prefer coffee." The smile faded as I turned, slipping out to a garden path lined with lavender. A rose trellis cast soft shadows. I stood there, the party's hum fading, when footsteps crunched behind me. "Excuse me? Are you Laura?" I turned. A man, gray-haired, in a tailored blazer with no tie, held a leather portfolio. His presence felt steady, out of place in the pageantry. "I'm Charles Reed," he said, offering a hand. "You're the Laura who saved our logistics hub last year." I blinked. "You're Nathan's father. He chuckled. In name, yes. He chases algorithms. I keep warehouses running. My team confirmed your LLC bailed out our Charlotte expansion. I've wanted to thank you. James crunched the numbers. I said. He studied me, eyes keen. Do they know who you are? I laughed softly. They've never cared to find out. He nodded. Maybe it's time they did. He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, and showed me the screen. Board meeting Monday. They need approval for a new equity pool. I've proposed you attend, seeing as you hold 15%. My breath caught. I didn't seek that. No, he said, smiling. But you earned it. A breeze stirred the roses. I opened my phone, typed a message to my contact. Call the vote. I'm in. Reed's driver picked me up at 7:45 Monday morning. I hadn't slept, but I looked sharp. Black. Sheath dress, hair pulled back, no jewelry but a thin copper ring. A vow to myself. The drive to Raleigh was quiet until the city skyline appeared. Don't waver, Reed said. Not even if they plead. I nodded. I won't. At 9:02, we entered the executive suite of Reed Enterprises. The hall hummed, lawyers, aides, cameras tucked discreetly in corners. The press wasn't invited, but they'd come, murmuring vote. The boardroom was all polished oak and leather, the air thick with coffee and tension. Nathan sat at the head, feigning ease. Samantha beside him, her lavender dress immaculate but her jaw tight. She hadn't expected me. Reed gestured to a chair. I sat, deliberate, as silence swept the room like a held breath. Before we start, Reed said, hands on the table, I'd like to introduce our voting co-chair, Ms. Laura Grayson. Samantha's eyes flared, her manicured nails digging into her purse. What is she doing here? She demanded. Reed was calm. Your engagement triggered an equity adjustment in the Carolina portfolio. The trust requires a unanimous vote, and Laura is a co-trustee. That's impossible, Samantha snapped. She's not family. She is, Reed said, on paper and by right. I slid a slim folder across the table. Clause 14C, page 5. My signature, filed 4 years ago under the Grayson Trust. I reactivated it last week. My father, at the table's end, went pale. Laura, you wouldn't. I met his gaze. I already have. Nathan leaned in, confused. This means... Without Laura's vote, Reed said, your engagement package has no claim to the Carolina or Virginia assets. Samantha stood, voice shaking. She's spiteful. She's sabotaging me because she's nothing. I held her stare. You stole my husband's designs. You mocked our life. You cut me out but begged for my money. And now you're mad, I said. No? My mother tried to intervene. This isn't the time. It's exactly the time, Reed said. The board accepts Ms. Laura Grayson's vote to nullify Samantha Pierce's engagement clause, effective immediately. The gavel fell. The doors swung open and the press surged in, cameras flashing, voices shouting, coup, family feud, hidden power. Samantha turned to me, trembling. You destroyed everything. I stood, smoothed my dress, and looked at her. No. You did that when you decided I didn't matter. She stepped forward, but Reed blocked her. It's over. I walked, out, flashes blinding, my face composed. Inside, I shook, not with fear, but with the weight of closure. This wasn't victory. It was truth, raw and overdue. It had rained the night before, a steady drizzle that left the world soft. By Sunday afternoon, the Charlotte hills were clear, the air scented with damp grass and pine. I opened the windows, letting the breeze in. The house was quiet, not the aching silence of loss, but a calm I'd earned. I walked to the back study, untouched since my grandmother's passing. Her desk still smelled of wax and old books, her novels neatly shelved, a loop tucked in a dictionary. An envelope sat on the desk under a tarnished silver lamp. I'd passed it all week, sometimes touching it, once lifting it before setting it back. Today, I sat, opened it, and pulled out a faded photo. Me, maybe 8, in Nana's garden, dirt on my knees, grinning as I held a sprouting bean plant. She stood beside me, her hand on my back, a trowel in the other. Behind the photo was a pressed daisy and a note in her tidy script. "You're enough always." I didn't cry at first. I let it sink in, filling the cracks no boardroom could. Touch. Then tears came, soft, freeing. Someone had seen me, not for what I gave or who I loved, but for me. I wiped my face, tucked the photo back, and grabbed my keys. The drive to my studio was quick, 12 minutes through quiet streets. The small storefront, mine for 4 years, had grown steadily, though I never mentioned it to family. The walls were bare. I hadn't held an exhibit in months. Today, I hung the photo on the main wall opposite the window in a simple oak frame with a brass plate. "Roots grow deep." Samantha had once laughed at my frames, saying they looked second-hand. I smiled now. As I adjusted it, a voice came from behind. "Ms. Grayson?" It was Mia, my intern, holding a stack of brochures. "Can I ask something?" I nodded. She hesitated. "How did you get through it all?" I thought of the sleepless nights, the legal battles, the silence. But I said, I stopped chasing their love and found my own. She nodded and returned to her work. I lingered by the photo, now visible to anyone passing by. Not to prove a point, but because I didn't have to anymore. I didn't win by tearing them down or shouting louder. I won by refusing to become them